is my favorite sail combination, wing on wing on wing. The wind has settled down to about 9 knots, so we have to squeeze everything out of the wind that we can. Hello, I'm Patrick Childress on Brick House. We're on a passage between the island of Reunion and Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. It'll be about 3, maybe 3.5 day passage total. But come on down below and I'll give you some tips and tricks in the galley on how to help cross an ocean. I don't know why we ever bought a 3-burner stove. We hardly ever used a 3rd burner. 2 burners would have spaced out better on top of the stove, so we could have a big pan and a pot. And sometimes the 1 burner will have a bigger burner. The smaller burner will be more efficient. It would give us more options. The 3rd burner is just taking up space unnecessarily. And of course, at sea, you always need fiddles. Some people call them pot holders, but I call them fiddles. They've always been called fiddles. And that'll help to keep the pot on the stove as it's gimbling back and forth, or the boat is just really bouncing around off the wave tops. But normally, if it's really rough, we just don't bother cooking. We'll eat something cold out of a can, or maybe just heat it up real quickly. But if somebody is going to be cooking while the weather is rough, it's really a good idea then to wear some foul weather gear, just in case there's some spillage, the cook won't get scorched. And of course, bouncing off of wave tops, or even just normal motion of the boat, it's really a good idea to have a galley strap. So that'll hook, we have 2 positions, one here and one here. So that way, if the boat is on a starboard tack and we're leaning, it'll keep us from falling into the stove. The other option is to hook in the other position, and now we can lean away from the stove. I really don't like these heavy china bowls so much. They're okay if we're at anchor in a nice calm place, but they have a small bottom, so they tend to tip over if you're at sea. And also, if they fall onto your foot, it really hurts. They're very heavy. They do retain heat for food, but to me that is secondary. I much prefer my stainless steel dog bowl that I got at the pet department in the grocery store. It has a very large bottom, nice and flat. It's hard to tip over. It's light. If it falls on your foot, it just bounces off with just a small ouch. But either one of these, they'll slide around on a smooth surface. So you do need some non-skid. That'll hold it in place. Either one of these. But if you don't have non-skid, another good choice is a damp paper towel. Either one. It's almost as good as Velcro. The other thing are plates. These plates are nice when we're in harbor, but of course they do slide around a little bit. Putting them on the wet paper towel or the rubber mat will keep them from sliding. But the problem is everything else slides right off the top. They're almost useless when we're at sea. I much prefer a pie pan. This one is aluminum. It'd be much better to have a stainless steel pie pan. Nothing falls out of it on top of a wet paper towel or the rubber mat. It doesn't go anywhere. The other thing is cups. We really like these cups that are very wide on the bottom, and they're only a little narrower than they are at the top. So they have a lot of good stability. That's heavy plastic. That's hard to break. The other option at sea, when things are really getting rough, is a low aspect ratio mug. It has its own top with little holes in it, so you can put that on top and have a nice secure drinking vessel. Anything that splashes around tends to recirculate inside, so it doesn't come out the top. The one thing when these are bought at the local chandlery, or the marine store is to first take out this tiny little screw at the top and the one on the bottom, because they are just common steel and they rust out very quickly. They need to be replaced with stainless steel screws. But these cups also come with their own non-skid on the bottom. Really nice to have while bouncing out off of wave tops. The one thing that this is superior for is a wine glass. I don't know why cruisers think it's an absolute must to serve wine in a wine glass. Wine glass have special sizes and shapes and everything else to accentuate different flavors. And the $5 box wine that all of us cruisers buy, I don't want to put in a glass like this. A wine glass like this, that it's very wide, it breathes quickly, it helps to make it taste much better, much sooner. People look at me funny when I decline their wine glasses to put my $5 wine in. I'll just stay with my big wide wine glass, thanks. Oh, talking about paper towels. It's far better to get half sheet paper towels. So that way you can cut them in half. How often do you really need a full sheet, even for keeping plates in place? One half sheet will do. It's far more economical. Getting away from the US, paper towels are very expensive. Most countries, a lot of countries, don't even use them. They are not available. So we try to make do and be as frugal as we can with using half sheet. A number of years ago, Seven Seas Cruising Association did a questionnaire with the sailboats that were crossing the Atlantic in a big rally. And the question was, how much fresh water did you use? And do you have foot pumps? Also, do you use salt water at the galley? And those that only use pressure water, fresh water, went through exponentially more fresh water than any of the other boats that have foot pumps, and especially those that use salt water. So what we have is a foot pump for the salt water and a foot pump for the fresh water. With the foot pumps, we can by far better adjust the water flow and how much we use, rather than using the pressure water and trying to meter it with this little lever. But better than that, we wash all of our dishes in salt water. We can use as much of that as we want, and then we rinse in salt water, and then we come back and rinse the salt and everything else off with the fresh water. A big conservation measure. This little faucet in the back is for the product water of our water maker, but we haven't really needed, we just don't use that water maker in over 11 years now. We catch rainwater like this, and we can also get water out of a nice clear stream. We stay away from muddy or discolored stream. The natives have been living off this water for thousands of years, and so for us Pelongis, maybe our stomach isn't used to some of the microbes that's in it, but it's nice clear water, certainly much clearer than what comes from the reservoirs and rivers that most municipalities in America use. So add a little chlorine to it and you're good to go. Rather than using a big dishwashing liquid bottle and trying to dispense from that, it's so much easier to have a little dishwashing dispenser that I picked up at Home Depot. But the important thing is, dispensers that you get at Home Depot are mostly chromed, and those are junk. They'll last maybe 9, 10, 11 months before they really start deteriorating and tarnishing. So you do have to spend a lot of money and get a stainless steel soap dispenser that's going to last and look good for any length of time. Okay, another safety item on the boat while we're at sea. This is one thing that I disconnected years ago, was the internal latches through this tiny little finger hole. I could imagine bouncing around off of wave tops and coming out with a finger that's just folded in half. So years ago, I had installed these external twist locks, and they've been on here now for over 11 years. Surprisingly, they've held up far better than I ever expected them to. But as a backup, when the weather really gets rough, I have this teak little twist lock here that helps to back up the upper twist lock. Now when we open the door, there's a spring latch right here that holds the door open. So when we're bouncing around, we don't have to fight with this door slamming back and forth. We can do what we need in the pantry here, and then when we're finished, we just push the spring slightly and close the door. We have that on all the large cabinet doors. These screens came from Glebe Creek Screens, located in Maryland. We have a similar spring up here on the big hatch. You bop it, it comes down, makes it very fast and easy for closing. Now, if we have the chance at a marina and before we head to sea, we take everything out of the freezer and defrost and get all the ice off from around the expansion plates so that everything will be far more efficient while we're at sea and just relying on battery power. Okay, the first thing to go back in is this rubber mat that has a lot of prongs on the bottom, and this helps to keep the food off of the bottom and help airflow underneath. But that alone isn't enough. So this grating goes in like this, upside down, and that helps a lot for the cold air to circulate around the bottom of all the frozen food. Now we're ready to put the food in. We finish up defrosting. The last thing we do is put the insulation back on top. We'll hide that nasty looking one, put the beautiful one on top just for the camera. And this is 2 layers of exercise mat. They're about 3/8 of an inch thick each, and it helps to insulate the top a little bit and keep down the condensation. These doors are rather thick, but we're a little sparse on insulation in these other areas. Being such an old boat, they never really planned that well for insulating these ice boxes, now turned into freezers and refrigerators. Okay, we have 3 cookbooks on this boat that are of any consequence that we do use occasionally. One is The Joy of Cooking. By far a better one for sailboats is The Cruising Chef Cookbook by Michael Greenwald. He has a lot of good advice in this book on food preservation and stocking up, and a lot of great recipes. One of the most unusual books, and this is a classic, is The Best of People and Food. This was published back in 1983 by Barbara Davis, who owned Cruising World magazine along with her husband Murray. And just to give you an example of what people ate back in 1983 while they're sailing around the world on their sailboats, is this recipe here. It says take 2 frigate eggs and 1 sprouted coconut, and you go ahead and can make pancakes out of that. Can you imagine printing something like that these days? But this is what the true cruisers used to send into Cruising World magazine and for their people and food section. Excellent if you can get a hold of this book.
You'll move.
How are you?
Alright, so we made it to Madagascar. Have to pick out some good local music. Hey, I hope this video was good for you. If it was, please give a thumbs up down below and a subscribe, and we'll see you soon.